Okay, time being 9 a.m. on March 30th, 2022. I'd like to call this meeting to order of Kane County's American Rescue Plan Committee. Clerk, please call the roll.
Bates,
Bates here.
Brown, Froz,
Fraz here.
Gums,
Gums here.
Kenyon,
Here.
Leonard,
Leonard here.
Martin, Molina,
Molina present.
Strothman,
Strathman here.
Tepe, and Sanchez.
Sanchez here. Okay, can I please have someone ask for unanimous consent to approve the minutes of March 16th, 2022?
Fraz moves.
Any objections or corrections? Hearing and seeing none, the minutes are approved. Public comment on agenda and non-agenda items. Is there anyone here or online that would like to deliver a public comment to this committee? Hearing and seeing none. Chairman's comments, pretty short agenda. I'll try and keep it brief. And that is reflected there in my comment. Program manager update. Peter is actually a little under the weather today, so he's not here. But all of his updates really just have to do with the technical back end aspect of the program, getting all the agreements, the vendor agreements and all the various things together that are really uninteresting to this committee for the most part, but it's necessary work for us to be able to get this money out. And very soon, within next day or so, our community support grant awardees will be able to start submitting their reimbursement. So very excited for that. And I'll let you guys know once that is in full swing. The big six have already been in contact with us and we're working on that. So if there's any questions you would have for Program Manager Peter Phillips, just let me know or send him an email. I'd be happy to get you an answer. Okay, under budget considerations, I just wanted to have this on here as an item of discussion because this is really what this committee needs to start thinking about now. What is our spending plan? What is our budget for the rest of this money? We all have various ideas of what we'd like to see the money go to. The public is very interested in knowing what we're going to be spending the money on. And so that is really our next task. There's nothing else that I can think of unless somebody else here can think of what else we need to be doing as a committee. Because once we figure out the spending plan, then it comes down to execution. So just very briefly, I had previously typed up some notes. I'll just share those with you. It's very rudimentary. I have a little more detailed scribbles in a notebook, but I'm going to share my screen real quick.
Hey,
Mr. Kenyon.
those of us who are running for re-election and have maybe an opponent, there's a lot of questions pertaining to this committee. from the news media.
Yeah.
I'd say, I'm sure, you don't have that, you didn't do that, did you? This was 5 or 6 questions. It was quite tiring and boring.
Well, I'm sorry that you had to go through that, Mike.
That was tough. And what are we gonna do with the money? How much or why?
Yeah.
Why didn't we give it all to AID or something like that?
All right, let me share just very briefly, just some notes. Again. Is this showing up on the screen, Blair? Okay. Those at home can see it, but you guys can't yet. There we go. So just some very rudimentary sketches of where we go next. The needs and wants. What are our needs? That's the primary consideration. And I think when we've talked about this before, the biggest need that has come up is making sure that our budget is taken care of. I think that's the number one concern. As far as needs go, outside of that, I don't know off the top of my head what the actual needs are that we've discussed. We need, higher pay for our people and things like that, but that's outside of this program's reach. So that's just the focus of everything is needs and wants. But I want to kind of get some numbers together, and Onzik is working on what would be a potential comfortable number for us to leave for budget gap uses, potential budget gap uses. We don't know exactly what we're going to need. Anyone following the finance committee knows that sometimes we get more revenue coming in than we realize. There's a lot of different moving pieces. So he's working on getting us some kind of figure that we can chew on to start with. Because I think that's the number one thing that everyone is interested in. Know how much do we want to utilize for potential budget purposes? So once we have at least something to work with there, then we can take a look at our departmental request. I think we've whittled it down to about $49 million. We're probably not going to be able to fund all of that. So we're going to have to determine what number are we comfortable with. Is it going to be 30 million, 40 million, 10 million, whatever it is, that's what we have to come up with. And once we know that, we can start executing on projects, but we have to prioritize. So after we determine the allocation, we have to really prioritize. So these are some potential ways that we could start looking at all of those department requests. So we have just what the department heads and elected officials tell us are their priorities. If they submitted 5 things, what are the top 2? Other ways to look at these requests, which projects are going to be going towards the economic recovery, which is a big part of the intention of the American Rescue Plan Act. So we have some projects that are in line with that. Health-related projects, such as what's coming from the health department specifically, very important, obviously, in the era of COVID. And then department-specific are there requests that are just going to be supplementing or supporting a specific department in the county. And then also what our county needs. I think one of the projects has to do with water, maybe not necessarily something our department needs, but in the future planning of the county, it may be something we want to consider. So these are just some of the sketches of ideas of how we might prioritize our departmental requests once we get to that point. And I'll definitely be open to any and all ideas from anyone on the committee and on the county board on how we might do that. But the process we'll have to go through really is just a prioritization and then decision-making. I don't know if we'll need to get the duo groups together again to start cutting things out of their department's request. But at the very least, I think at the next meeting, we should have this conversation in full, determine how we want to prioritize those requests, and then we can decide which ones to cut off of the list. But I think all of the department requests show some kind of need or some kind of good use of money in the county. Ms. Molina?
Thank you, Chairman Sanchez. When we did this exercise back in October and November, and we were in the duo groups, we went through the request. I know as the health department came to us, and one of the big requests was getting a mobile VAX van. That was in October. Had we, everything had gone as well as we would have had a mobile VAX van in, May or June, but that hasn't happened. So I will continue to request that to be put at the top of the list, because we know that Kane VAX site is not going to be sustainable for the next year. People are going to be eligible for their 4th dose now. So we're going to need some kind of help for the health department. My second question was related to the FEMA funds. do we have something in writing saying which of these department requests could possibly be FEMA related? Because that would help in our decision process too, I think.
We had Ernst and Young look at, cursory glance at the requests, and there were very few that are FEMA eligible. And I think the vac site was the number one thing. So I don't know if you guys remember recently, we kind of did a little accounting jujitsu with Joe Onzik, and we took the money we spent on the vac site. It was taken from ARPA. We put that back and used COVID savings money for the vac site. So now those are eligible for reimbursement. So there wasn't too much, unfortunately, out of
Okay.
all of these that are FEMA eligible. There's a spreadsheet somewhere. I think I sent it out to you guys a few months ago, but I can try and dig it up again.
Okay.
It really doesn't tell you much more than that.
Okay, just to keep us on our, like, because Dave and I did, a couple of departments, and some of them were like, this needs to be done now. This is part of the recovery plan. We should be saying yes to this immediately. So maybe some kind of timeline, like when would we expect to say yes to these departments? Because I mean, we're in the middle of the year already, so.
Yeah, I think once we know which ones we're gonna fund, then that timeline gets created immediately, and we get executing on these projects. And that it'll be pretty busy for Peter and maybe myself and Jenny, but once this committee figures it out, then we can get going on it. Knowing some of the money doesn't come in till May, but that's, 2 months away.
Right.
So by the time we have it all figured out and get going, that other
Do you think
money,
within the next 30 days, we should be able to decide?
yeah,
Okay.
I don't see why not. Again, there's really not anything else for this committee to do at this point. So let's focus like a laser on what our spending plan is going to be, knowing there's a lot of unknowns, there's a lot of uncertainties, and we have to come up with something, and we can change it later on if we need to. So those are just some considerations, some notes that I typed up, how we might prioritize, some lenses we might look at for prioritizing. Then external requests, we don't really have many external requests, but Cossacane County is one that comes to mind. And then the possibility of round 2 of the community support grant program. What that might look like. Would we do it the same way? Would we expand our parameters and eligibility requirements, things like that? Then administrative costs. It's very minimal so far with Ernst & Young. The first month's invoice came in recently. I'll make sure that gets sent out. Did we send that out already? The invoice for Ernst & Young? Okay, I'll make sure that gets sent out to you guys so you can see it. I think it was somewhere around $107,000 or $97,000, something like that. It's very, very small number for a lot of work to be done in that time. So we're doing pretty good on that. We have up to $1 million authorized, and for Peter and Jenny, and then SAO and finance assistance. I know Joe Onzik is going to be getting somebody in his department soon, but some of that money won't even come from ARPA. So administrative costs are going to be very minimal. And outside of that, that I'm aware of, we don't really have anything we need to be paying attention to for our budget, for a spending plan. I know, Ms. Bates, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but about the report on the budget gaps, possible budgetary needs from Mr. Onzik. Has he given us a date when he can do that? Do we know? And it sounds like, it'll take him some time to do that. Do we know when it'll be ready?
I don't. I'll check in with him today. He's working on it though.
Okay.
So, and he's got a lot of spinning plates, as you might be aware of. So.
Well, let's make sure we're one of those plates.
Oh yes, we definitely are. And
Okay.
he's been a great help considering how much work his department has. Yeah, so by the next meeting, we'll have some kind of figure to start with, and I'll be in touch with everyone ahead of that, because I want to get ideas before just saying, here's what we could do. Here's a potential plan, work on it. I want to get your guys' input before we get to the meeting. I just think that would be a more comfortable way for all of us to do it instead of hashing out everything in the meeting. So if we can have a little, forethought go into this, then that's better. So any questions or comments on this, Mr. Frost?
Yeah, I just want to mention that, we've had some recent discussions. Well, we've had many discussions over a long period, but it's heightened recently about the building requirements and so forth. And there's been a lot of talk along those lines, broken down into 2 areas: judicial center needs for expansion and the possibility of moving this campus out to Peck. So I would like to throw that in the pot for consideration under needs. I believe that some counties have set precedent in using some of this money for that. And I'm not proposing a huge chunk, but, if we could put, 10% or something into that pot for future needs for our buildings, that'd be something to talk about.
Okay. Mr. Leonard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would request that Ernst & Young give this committee in particular a short synopsis or definition of what the ARPA monies can be used for. We've had a lot of discussion back and forth. Well, it can be used for this. No, it can't. I would like some definitive answers to specifically how we can use that. Number one, to help out our internal requests. Number two, to balance the budget. And then number three, to see if there is any additional money for outside sources.
Yeah, well, I mean, the information is there on the Treasury website. I'll see what Ernst & Young has as far as a summary. I
Yeah,
think that's what you're looking
I'd like
for.
something specific, reading over the pages, you read in one area that this is allowable, and then there are conditions for that being allowed. I would like to get, a more specific idea of how we as a county board can spend this money. And obviously my concern is the internal request first, because we do have financial concerns immediately, but also down the road. And two of the things that we have to look at, and I understand they're not in the purview of this committee, but we have to look at getting employees' salaries up to a competitive level. And number two, we also have to look at the cost to implement the mandates we're getting.
Mhm.
And those are two substantial things that will go into our budget. But I'd like to find out what, if anything, we could do with the ARP money to help in those two areas. And if not, maybe in other areas of the budget, so that we will have the money in other areas for the salary increases and the mandate costs. And the mandate costs are substantial.
Yeah, my last reading of the final rule is you can spend it on payroll to bring you back up to pre-COVID
Mhm.
staffing levels. We have a resolution going through for what is it, the payroll reimbursement.
Yeah.
That is one, once you're reimbursed for that money goes into the COVID savings fund and can be used for anything.
Right.
So that's one way, one thing to keep in mind. And then with, like, say with the budget, the budget gap issue, if we're to use money for that, that's just money. We don't put it into a savings account or separate it. People have talked about, how to do that. It just sits there in the fund. And then that comes out of revenue recoupment money. So when we go to do the revenue loss formula calculations, that money comes out of there. And our department requests the same. Either it's a request that falls under one of the major spending categories, or it comes under government services.
And we do have the money that we've already received from ARP in a reserve for that purpose, correct?
Yeah, we have it in a fund. It's sitting there.
Right.
Mhm.
And so with the 51.5 million we're getting in May, I think we need to look at that too, to see how we want to allocate that.
Yeah, I look at it all as one.
Okay.
Yeah, it's two tranches. We get the second in May, but it gets more complicated when you just focus on the first and then the second. We just look at the whole big picture, and then we can figure out where the money comes from it specifically.
I like that. The other thing was Peter Phillips was nice enough to get me an up-to-date amount of unallocated ARP money, including the May allocation. And that right now stands at just under $71 million. So we still have a substantial amount of money there to use to help, balance our budget, improve things in the county. But we have to, as you said before, we have to define specifically what we're going to do in each and every department, and then also the allocation of that. So I think it's important that we maybe at the next meeting, if Ernst & Young could be available, I don't want to catch them off guard right now, but where they could maybe give us a brief summary of how we do that by putting it into a reserve or a special fund or whatever, and then having the ability to use it whatever way we want.
Well, no, it's in a fund now. We
The
can't
money
put-
that we've
Yeah,
received already.
Yeah, the
yes.
ARPA money can't go into some special rainy day fund or reserve account or anything like that. It's just in its own fund right now. And as we decide what we're going to do with it, we take money out of that. We
Right.
did create a separate, was it a sub account for revenue recoupment.
Yes.
And so, yeah, otherwise it's just, we come up with the idea on paper, what we're gonna do, and then we take the money, we draw it down from that fund. So we don't
Okay,
have to
great.
do much more moving of the money. It's just waiting. It's whispering to all of us, spend me, put me in the community, use me wisely. So any other questions or comments on budget considerations from online? Okay.
Bates, just a
Oh,
comment,
Ms.
please.
Bates. Mhm.
We've heard from Mr. Fraz about buildings and Mr. Leonard about internal requests and budgetary issues. I believe I'm paraphrasing here, putting words in people's mouths possibly, but I'd like to say one more time that I would like to see another CSG round, the community support grants. I feel like that's really the spirit of the ARPA money, was to help the community as much as possible. And we've done, let's all take one victory lap for what we've been able to do so far. And let's appreciate that some of these amounts are not enough for these nonprofits that we are trying to help, and that there are nonprofits that we narrowed out, that we edged them out of the race, another race metaphor, but by concentrating on mental health, homeless shelters, and food pantries. So there are other groups such as CASA who don't fall into those three categories, but are very important to our community. So I'm putting in another plug for another community support grant round 2, just to keep that on people's minds.
Appreciate that, Ms. Bates. Although
Mr.
you are a
Chair.
little ahead of us. I think at the next meeting, we're going to enact a sort of British parliamentary style where everyone just sort of yells at each other from the other side and throws chairs, maybe hot coffee and warm coffee. So yeah, save it for that.
Do we have to wear wigs? Do we get wigs?
I think
That
that
was
would be a
my
good idea.
question.
Yeah, I like that. Mr. Tepe?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Tepe here. I'd like to, sorry, my apologies for being late. I was in another meeting, but I'd like to really make sure that we, as quickly as possible, look at the internal requests and get them on the agenda.
Absolutely. That's the plan. Mr. Kenyon?
I was just thinking, probably the largest nonprofit in the county is county government. And whenever we invest in the county here, it does good for everybody. I'm just thinking of the clerk's office. If we can make that run better, it helps more people than anything else. And it's countywide. It's not just Aurora or Elgin or something like that. So just remember, we're a nonprofit. We only have certain ways to raise money, and they're all painful. Gas tax, retail tax. If we can keep the county going and save the people some money.
I'm seeing an opportunity for raw milk sales and something like that.
You got that up by you.
All right. If there's no other questions or comments, we'll move on. All right. Okay, nothing for other committee matters. So we'll move on to new business. We have a resolution authorizing the position of part-time administrative coordinator for the American Rescue Plan Committee to replace the temporary administrative assistant position and corresponding budget adjustment for ARPC program manager. I need a motion and a second.
Kenyon
Bates
would
moves.
move that.
Bates?
Leonard seconds.
Okay, and there are a couple edits. I am sorry. Steve, could you please approach the podium? Our Assistant State's Attorney here. There's a couple edits that you wanted us to make for this resolution, and I apologize, I didn't send that out ahead of this, but if you could just go over those very briefly.
Thank you, Chair Sanchez.
Oh, I think your mic isn't on. How does that one work?
Where's our technicians when we need them?
Hey, Steve, you can come up to one of these if you want.
Thank you, Chair Sanchez. Stephen Ford from the State's Attorney's Office. So the technical amendments that I just wanted to point out, and they are in the resolved paragraph, so I do think it would be important just for clarity. would be in the first resolved paragraph, inserting the word assistant after the words temporary administrative. Just so it's clear that this is, would replace the temporary administrative assistant position. That would be the first one. The other technical edit we would suggest be made is in the final clause of the third resolved paragraph, right before the budget table. It refers to this new position as American Rescue Plan Program Coordinator. It should reference American Rescue Plan Administrative Coordinator. So we would suggest striking out the words part-time position of American Rescue Plan Coordinator and replacing them with the words part-time position of American Rescue Plan Administrative Coordinator, just to be consistent with the rest of the resolution. Just error in one spot.
Okay, so if someone could please move to amend this resolution to reflect those suggested changes, recommended changes from the state's attorney's office.
I would move to Jim.
Kenyon
make
moves
the
to amend.
Leonard
recommended
seconds.
change.
Leonard seconds. Clerk, will we please have a vote on that?
Excuse me. Chair Sanchez, I'd like to ask a question once again. We had brought up at the last meeting a concern that I had that with respect to the health insurance for a part-time employee, I see where we changed the wording to 20 hours a week, not up to, but 20 hours a week. And I was wondering if maybe Jamie could give us a little more insight on that.
Certainly. Jamie Labrillo, Executive Director of Human Resources. Health insurance and dental insurance and benefits eligibility begins at 21 hours per week by policy. So this employee could be a regular 20-hour-a-week employee and would not be eligible for health and dental benefits. At 21 hours a week, an employee is eligible, but is responsible for the full cost of the premium. It is not until 30 hours per week that an employee becomes eligible for full benefits in which the county would pay a portion.
Excellent definition. Thank you very much.
And thank you for the reminder, Mr. Leonard. That was the whole reason we delayed this resolution. And it's the one thing I forgot to mention. So thank you, Ms. Labrillo, for being here to discuss that with us. Okay, any other questions? We're voting on the amendment. Okay, clerk, please call the roll.
Bates,
Bates, yes.
Brown, Bras,
Raz, yes.
Gums,
Gums, yes.
Kenyon,
Yes.
Leonard,
Leonard, yes.
Martin, Molina,
Molina, yes.
Strothman,
Strathman, yes.
Tepe,
Tepe, yes.
and Sanchez.
Yes. Okay, resolution passes. We have nothing under old business unless you guys have something. No need for executive session. I just need a motion to adjourn
Motion to adjourn.
by Mr. Kenyon, second by Mr.
Leonard
Frost.
seconds.
All those in favor, say aye.
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 We are adjourned.